All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today we're doing something, well, a little crazy. We're going to try and cover 5,000 years of Indian history. We're talking ancient civilizations, massive empires, golden ages, and all the way up to the birth of the world's largest democracy. Buckle up. So that's the big question, right? How on earth do you cram 5,000 years into just a few minutes? Well, you can't tell every story, so we're going to focus on the major turning points. The moments of invention, the huge conquests, the revolutions that really shaped the India we see today. Okay, so here's our game plan. We're breaking this epic story down into 6 parts. We'll start with ancient foundations, then move to the Age of Empires, cover the medieval sultanates and Mughals, dive into the British Raj, explore the struggle for a nation, and wrap up with modern India. Ready? Let's get started. Okay, section 1. We're starting way back. Deep antiquity. This is the era of mysterious lost cities and the creation of sacred texts, basically where the very first seeds of Indian civilization were planted. And you'll see some of these ideas are still incredibly powerful today. So this timeline is kind of like our map for this whole journey. Just look at the huge gaps in time between these dates. Each one represents a massive shift, a whole new chapter being written for the subcontinent. Let's dive into that first one, way back at the beginning.
First stop, the Indus Valley Civilization. And get this was one of the world's very first major civilizations. We're not talking about a few huts here. We're talking about huge, brilliantly planned cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, with things like sophisticated drainage systems that were light years ahead of their time. And then, poof, they just disappeared. It's one of history's great mysteries.
So after the Indus Valley civilization faded away, something new took its place. It wasn't about cities this time, it was about ideas. This was the Vedic Age. And during this period, ancient sacred stories and hymns were finally written down in texts called the Vedas. These texts became the absolute foundation of Hinduism and basically wrote the cultural software for the subcontinent for thousands of years to come. All right, so with those deep spiritual foundations in place, what comes next? Well, power. People started to organize and build bigger things. And that brings us right into our second section, the Age of Empires. This is a time of huge territories being unified under powerful rulers, but it's also a time when brand new faiths began to pop up and challenge the old ideas. Seriously, this period was just an explosion of activity. You had 16 powerful kingdoms called the Mahajanapadas, all battling for control. And out of all this chaos, 2 major new religions were born, Buddhism and Jainism. It all leads up to the creation of India's first massive empire, the Mauryan Empire, led by guys like Emperor Ashoka, who became this incredible champion for Buddhism, spreading it all over Asia. After the Mauryan Empire, things could have fallen apart, but instead, something amazing happened. The Gupta Empire rose up, and this period is now known as the Golden Age of India. And for good reason. It was a time of relative peace, a lot of wealth, and just an unbelievable explosion of brainpower and creativity. And speaking of brain power, this era gave the world something that would change, well, everything. I'm talking about the number 0. The concept of 0. It seems so simple to us now, right? But developing it as an actual number was a total game changer. It was a mathematical revolution that laid the groundwork for algebra, for calculus, for the computer or phone you're using right now. And believe me, 0 was just the tip of the iceberg. During this golden age, there were incredible breakthroughs in science and math, a real flourishing of Hindu culture, and just breathtaking masterpieces in art and literature. It created this intellectual treasure chest that the rest of the world would be borrowing from for centuries. But you know how it goes. Golden ages don't last forever. As the classical era started to fade, new groups of people, new powers started showing up from the northwest. And that brings us to our third big chapter, the medieval sultanates and the Mughals. This is where the culture of the subcontinent gets a major shakeup.
So for about 300 years, the Delhi Sultanate was the main power. Now, this wasn't just one single empire, but a whole series of different Turkic and Afghan dynasties that ruled from the city of Delhi. They brought in a wave of Persian culture and really expanded the influence of Islam. And you can still see their impact today in some of the incredible architecture they left behind.
And then came the big one, an empire that's famous all over the world, the Mughals. They were founded by a warrior named Babur, and under legendary rulers like Akbar the Great and Shah Jahan, they reached incredible heights. We're talking brilliant administration, incredible wealth, and, of course, they built the Taj Mahal, maybe the most beautiful building on earth. But as the mighty Mughal Empire started to weaken, it left a huge power vacuum. And nature and history hates a vacuum. And this time, the new power didn't come over the mountains. It came by sea. Which leads us to Section 4, the British Raj. Now, this wasn't a sudden invasion. It was a slow burn. It started with a corporation, of all things, the British East India Company. They were just supposed to be traders. But after winning critical battles like the Battle of Plassey, this company basically started acting like the government. Eventually, things got so messy that the British Crown just stepped in and took direct control in 1858.
And the legacy of British rule is, well, it's complicated, and people still argue about it fiercely today. On one side, you have the introduction of huge infrastructure projects like railways and the telegraph, plus modern education systems. But on the other side, that rule was fueled by the systematic draining of India's wealth and resources, and it led to some absolutely horrific famines.
Well, you can probably guess what happened next. When you rule over a people like that, sooner or later, they're going to push back. And that's exactly what happened. This colonial rule sparked one of the most powerful independence movements in history, which brings us to our 5th section, the struggle for a nation. And this wasn't just a few leaders in a back room somewhere. No way. This was a movement of the people. We're talking millions of ordinary Indians mobilized for one cause, self-rule. And they were led by incredible figures like Mahatma Gandhi, with his revolutionary ideas about nonviolent resistance, and Jawaharlal Nehru, who would go on to become the country's first prime minister. And they were smart about it, too. It was a strategic, step-by-step campaign. It started with things like the non-cooperation movement, then escalated to civil disobedience. You've probably heard of the famous Salt March. And finally, the Quit India movement. Each one was designed to turn up the pressure, to make British rule impossible. And in August of 1947, it happened. They won. India was independent. But this moment of incredible joy was also marked by immense tragedy. Freedom came with a price, the violent partition of the subcontinent into 2 countries, India and Pakistan. It was a decision that led to unimaginable violence and created one of the largest refugee crises in human history. So, out of all that turmoil, a new nation was born, and it had to figure out its place in the world on its own terms. And that brings us to our final section, the story of modern India. The journey of independent India has been just incredible. You have the Green Revolution, which was this massive agricultural push that finally allowed India to feed itself. Then, in 1991, they opened up the economy, which kicked off the huge IT and tech boom we see today. And through all these ups and downs, it has remained the world's largest democracy and has become a major, major player on the world stage. So, there you have it. 5,000 years in just a handful of minutes. We've gone from the perfectly planned cities of the ancient world to the bustling tech hubs of today. It's an unbelievably deep, complex story that's still being written every single day. Which leaves us with the big question, right? For a civilization so ancient and a nation so dynamic, what on earth is the next chapter going to be?